Hello, everyone. My name is Upkar Liddar, and I'm a developer advocate at IBM. And today we are going to talk about Code Engine. So I just realized I don't have a slide with my name on it uh, today. But however, if you see under my video, my name's spelled out there. Also, my Twitter handle is there. If you want to get in touch on Twitter or on LinkedIn, please do so. Um, so let's get started. All right, so what is this thing called IBM Code Engine? So IBM Code Engine is a fully managed runtime where developers can go from your local desktop or your local code base to deploying in production very quickly. In addition to that, it also lets you scale down to zero and scale up as needed. And finally, you pay what you use. If you want to try out Code Engine, I'll have a link for you later as well. There is there is a very generous free tier that is provided with Code Engine that you can look at once you sign up on IBM Cloud. And again, I'll put a link in the chat later. Or I know my partner in crime, Joe, is going to join me soon. Joe, if you're listening, and can share the link to sign up for IBM Cloud while we do the workshop, that'll be great. Thank you. Okay. And the next question people generally ask is, so is Code Engine the right tool to use, right? So Code Engine lets you deploy or run your code on the cloud. There are a lot of other platforms that'll let you do the same thing, right? So you may be asking, hey, I'm used to working with containers. I'm a Kubernetes developer. Um, should I look into Code Engine? So the answer is absolutely yes. Code Engine makes it really easy to run your containers and images on cloud. So it also, if need be, lets you go under the covers and actually work with the Kubernetes artifacts and components. You may be saying, hey, I'm not a Kubernetes developer. I don't know anything about containers. I've worked with something like Cloud Foundry or Heroku. I work with that in my job. And for me, deploying to cloud is as easy as making changes to my code and doing something like Cloud Foundry push or Heroku push or even a Git push to push my application to cloud. Is Code Engine something that I should look at? And the answer again is yes. As you'll see in the demo and in the workshop, the user experience with Code Engine is made very simple, and so it as a developer who's used to Heroku and Cloud Foundry and other platform as a service platforms, it's really easy for you to switch over or at least give Code Engine a try. You may also be asking, hey, by the way, I only work in the back end. I only work with batch jobs that run, for example, nightly or on a regular basis. Or you may say, hey, I've created a job that maybe processes images as images come into a cloud object storage, or I process data as it comes into a database. Should I be interested in Code Engine? And the answer again is yes. So Code Engine lets you run batch jobs. Uh, and I should say not just batch jobs, it lets you run long batch jobs in the cloud. And so I won't show you an example today, but I'll point you to where you can look at examples of how to do that. And finally, serverless or a function as a service has become quite a buzzword in the last couple of years. And so you may be saying, hey, I'm not interested in this past thing. I've moved on. All my code is deployed as a function on a cloud. Should I be interested in Code Engine? Can I use Code Engine? Absolutely. So Code Engine has this serverless concept built in. Your application or your code scales down to zero when it's not being used and then scales up to a max limit that is defined by you as the user. And again, we'll look at all of these shortly in examples. All right. What I just said, right? There are a number of different platforms that you can use to push your code to production. What Code Engine brings to the table is that you don't have to choose. So you don't have to choose between the simplicity of Cloud Foundry versus the modern approach that function as a service takes. You can have both of those things together in this platform. The other thing is, and this, the slide is labeled "Inconvenient Truth," is that Kubernetes is not for developers, and I I agree with that personally. The other developers may not, but I certainly feel as developers, our main role is to write code to add features that at the end of the day results in some business process or results in um, I guess making money for the client or fulfilling some purpose. Our job as developers, even though we get pulled into it, is not to work on infrastructure. It's not to make sure our jobs are created on the cloud and run properly. That shouldn't be our jobs as developers who's working on, JavaScript code or Python code or whatever code you work on. Um, by the way, I just want to say if you hear random noises coming from my microphone, there's a lot of construction going on, renovation going on in my house. So I pardon me for that. All right, with that, you'll see I don't have a lot of slides because the beauty of Code Engine is that it's so easy to demo and to use. I want to dive right into a demo and not do any more slides. So this session here, what we'll do is, in a previous session, you went through an exercise where you built a Node.js application, Express.js application, I should say, and you added some cloud-native features and capabilities into that application, right? So if you remember, or if you didn't do that part, that's okay. I'll refresh your memory here. Basically, you started off with a well, the first couple of sections are installing some version of Kubernetes on your system, installing Helm, etc. But then this is where the meat of the tutorial is, right? So you create a new directory, and then you install Express. You install this thing called Helmet, and Helmet is a middleware that gives you some nice defaults for your HTTP headers. And you can read more about it in the tutorial as well. We installed something called Pino. That's how I say it. And Pino is a logging library. It helps you write um, logs, nicely formatted logs out from your application. Then you created a server.js file. This is where our server lives. And essentially, it's listening on a port for incoming requests. And if request comes in on this forward slash or your home route, then it sends out a result of hello world back to the caller. So it's fairly simple. Again, the goal here is not to teach Express, not to teach JavaScript, but it's to understand how would you take a Node.js application like this and use Code Engine to push this to a cloud environment, right? And then you do npm start to actually start your application. After this comes the more cloud native bits, right? So there's this concept in Kubernetes and cloud native of health checking. And that's a system where something external, a monitoring system, will constantly or frequently or regularly ping your application at a certain endpoint to check if the application is up and running. That's called a liveliness test. And it's one of the many tests that folks who work on Kubernetes use to keep an eye on their system, on their application. So here you can see we added a / live, and this is the endpoint. And if somebody calls this endpoint, we send a status 200 with a JSON of status OK. Fairly simple. Let's move on, and then you start your application again. You can test that. All right, and then you added some metrics to your application. You used a solution called Prometheus to, again, it does something similar. It scrapes an endpoint to collect metrics about your application. So we install this thing called Prom Client, which is a Prometheus client. And then inside your code, you use it like this. So you collect your default metrics, and then whenever somebody comes to this endpoint called / metrics, you use that client to return back those metrics. Okay, so again, fairly simple. Let's see. They don't have an example here of what this looks like, but it gives you information about your CPU usage, your memory, and other pieces of information that will be helpful to you. As your application becomes more complex, or even to detect certain things like if your application is misbehaving in a certain way, so if it's using too much CPU or memory, then this will give you a good pointer, or at least alert you to that. So very important things that we use in the cloud native world in order to monitor our applications. All right, and then finally, the tutorial goes to build a Docker file, and this Docker file essentially runs the application in a container. And this is where we'll pick up. So I'll follow all these steps from number one all the way down to building a Docker file, and then we'll see how easy it is to take that Docker file and deploy it as an application on Code Engine. All right, and I also see on the screen there is a URL where you can sign up for IBM Cloud and get going. There's it says free cloud. That's true. You do get a very generous free account, and a lot of services on IBM Cloud do have what we call a light tier, so you get to try them out and use them without paying or without entering your credit card. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's start coding. So the other thing I've done is here I've logged into IBM Cloud. Let me actually go to the main page. If you've never seen IBM Cloud before, this is what it looks like. When you log in, you're shown your dashboard, and it gives you a summary of what different services you have deployed, any messages or communication that's coming in from the cloud side. So this is your dashboard. There are two URLs or two links here that I always point out, very important. The first one is this catalog, and this is where you can see all of the different services that are provided on IBM Cloud. So if you go there, click on services, you can filter by category. So let's say you're interested in AI and machine learning, you can filter by that, and you'll see different services here. Now, if a service says light or free, then again, this just means there's a free plan or a light plan for you to try out the service. So Watson Assistant is used to build conversations and chatbots. Watson Studio is our machine learning AI suite of products, and there's a whole bunch of other services here. If you click on any of these cards, you can go look at documentation, the API, the different pricing options outside of the light or the free tier. So you feel free to do that as well. I'm going to uncheck that. So this was number one, is this catalog. And the second thing, which I visit very regularly when I'm working on projects, is this thing here called, let's see, resource list. And resource list is a list of all the resources that I've created in my account. This is a shared account, so there's a lot of different resources, but keep that in mind. If you're ever using IBM Cloud, no matter what screen you're on, you can always go back to your resource list, and to create new services, you can use this catalog thing. There's also the search bar on top, which does the same thing. It'll let you look for services existing or new services that you want to create. Right. So for example, I love Cloudin. Cloudin is a NoSQL database that we offer on IBM Cloud. And if I were to type Cloudin here, you can see there's a bunch of services I already created, but then also I can create a new one down here. All right, let's go back to task at hand, which is Code Engine. So let's see if I go click on this menu, this hamburger menu, and go to Code Engine, and let's go to Overview. This is our landing page for Code Engine. I'll leave this up, and we'll go back to the tutorial and get to the point where we had a Docker file running. All right, so let's go back here. And let's start. So the first thing it wants me to do is install. I'm not going to install Helm. I'm not going to install Kubernetes locally because I'm not deploying on Kubernetes. And I already have this thing called. Actually, you know what? Let's just follow this. So first thing it wants us to do is make a directory. I'm going to put this on the side here. I'm going to get my terminal, put it here. I'm going to get out of this. And I think I have a directory called temp, because I think everybody has a directory called temp. And let's see if I have already got this. Nope, I don't have the express directory. So good. So make dir express app. Okay. And then cd into that folder. And then it wants me to initialize a npm project or a node project. So npm init --y to take the defaults. Great. I have an npm, a node project going. Joe or Luke, if the text is too small, please let me know. I can increase it. All right, so next thing we'll do is npm install express, which is my express.js server, right? So give that a second to install. Great, express is done installing, and then the next thing we'll do is install helmet. And again, Helmet provides some nice uh, secure defaults for your HTTP headers. Now, this is okay for beginners, right? Right. So to take some defaults that have been created by Helmet, but also if you're doing this, go read what the defaults they're using. It's always good to see what's going on under the covers and what kind of defaults are being provided. And then we'll install Pino, which is our logging library. Okay, with that being installed, you'll see right now I have my Node.js or package.json file and then Node modules, right? So not much going on here. Let's create a new server.js file. Wonderful. And then let's open this up, right? So we'll open it up in VS Code because why not? And we have server.js here. All right, so I'm going to copy this code and paste it. But if we go through this, it's fairly simple. I'm importing all my libraries. I'm defining my port as the environment port or 3000. If it's not found, I'm creating a new application, Express application. I'm telling my application to use Helmet middleware to get all of that, all of the default HTTP headers in my responses. And then I'm saying if somebody comes into this route, send back hello world. Hey, my application, start listening on this port. Okay, fairly simple. Copy this, and I'm going to paste it here. Okay, let's get rid of the sidebar. Let's also open the terminal down at the bottom. Okay. Let's save this file and let's start it. npm start, my application started. You can see this server listening on port 3000. This is the pino.info coming out here. And then I can go to a new tab, go localhost 3000, and you can see hello world was printed out. Fairly simple. All right, so what do we do next? So add health checks to your system, to your application. It's and the way to do that is add another endpoint before my get. So this is /live. And again, it's just returning a simple 200 back with a JSON status of OK. Let's save it. And I'm going to run my application again. I could have used NodeMon to keep it running and refreshing, but I'm following the tutorial strictly today. All right, so let's go back, localhost 3000 /live, and you can see it gives me status OK. All right, so I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to add metrics to the application. The reason being Code Engine provides a lot of this to us when we deploy the application. So I want to show that to you instead of doing it here. The next thing I do want to do, however, is to get this Docker file. So you can see it's just a simple curl, get me the Docker file and store it into this thing called dockerfile-run. Okay, so I'm going to paste that here, and we're going to look at the Docker file. So Docker file run. This is my Docker file. You can see it's starting with a Node 14 base image, and then it says change the working directory to that, and then it installs a whole bunch of updates to my base image. It copies the package star, so both package.json and package lock.json over, and then it runs npm install. So that was my base image, and then from there, it then creates this other thinner or tiny image that it'll use to actually run my application, right? So in the first one, it did npm install production, and in the second one, it's going to copy from that image everything that I need to run my application. It's going to set some environment variables, and then it's going to say npm start. A very typical Docker file for an Express application. Now, the next step here is build my application. So Docker build dash dash, let's just say dash T, Express app. I'm going to call it something else, right? And let's call it my NearForm app, okay? Give me 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. All right. So we're going to call it this. Well, it's actually okay. This is fine. Let's tag it as 1.0.0 dash dash file or dash f um, Docker file run. And the reason I have to do this is because by default it looks for something called Docker file. Since I changed the name, I have to specify or tell it what the name is. Hit enter. Now it's going through the process. This should be fairly fast because I was doing this yesterday and it should already have some of the base images. Okay, so it's let it do that for a second. By the way, just as an aside, I'm using Podman under the hood because I'm using a Fedora system. But I just alias Docker to Podman. But it's the commands look identical between the two for most part. All right, we'll let that run for a second. And then I'm just going to run that to show you it runs fine. It's done. So then I can use, so I like to just take the same build thing and instead of build, I'll just say run. I have to expose a port. So I'll say 3000, 3000. And let's see what this does. Um, um, okay, so it's running. You can see it's the same as before. If I go to localhost 3000, I still get my hello world. All right, so I'm done with my Docker file. I'm going to push this image to Docker Hub. So let's see if I'm logged in. I should be. Oh, actually, you know what? To push it to Docker Hub, I need to give it a namespace, right? I forgot to do that. So let's do that real fast here. And while it's doing that, I'll do a bunch of other things. All right, so while it's building that image, it should be fairly fast because I already have everything. Okay, it's done. Um, so I call my image Upkar in this one. So I'm just going to say now, I'm going to push it up. Oops. All right, so push, 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 push. Hopefully I'm still logged in. Okay, so it's pushing my file up to Docker Hub. If I go to Docker Hub, I have it here. I was trying this yesterday. Um, let's see. Refresh this page. Here's my NearForm app. Once you have an image, one of the ways you can deploy an application to Code Engine is by, let me make this full screen. So it's by pointing it to an existing image on a registry. We are using Docker Hub. So I want to create a new project. You have to assign a area region to a project. Let's say US South. I have to name this project something, say NearForm. I have to give it a resource group, which you can read more about on IBM Cloud. We're going to use this demos thing. And then let's say create. So it's created a code engine project for me. A project can host applications and jobs. And so when this is done, we'll go in and we'll point it to the image we just created. And it'll do the rest for us. Okay. If this takes a while, then I'm going to go to what I created yesterday so I can at least show you what this looks like. All right, while that is happening, I do want to, what I did was on GitHub, I do have a repository called, programmers are not good at naming, right? So I called it Upkar delete, but basically this is the same code. You can see it's got this Docker run, Docker file run, Docker file, and then it's got my server.js. If I go in there, you'll see it's the same thing. Uses helmet, and then this. All right, so let's go back to our project that is still creating. All right, my project is now created. So let's go inside here and we shall create an application. Now, there are multiple ways to do this. So what we will do is we'll point it to a Docker Hub image. So NearForm Docker Hub. That's my application name. I'm going to point it to a container image, configure, and I'm going to use docker.io. My namespace is Upkar. And if you remember, let's open this up so I can copy. This is my repository. So let's go back to Code Engine, give that as my repository name. And I do have a tag, I believe, of 1.0.0. So if I go back here, 1.0.0. All right, so I've given it information about Docker Hub. The one thing you didn't see me do was sign into Docker Hub because I've already done that when I was trying this out yesterday. All right, so I did get my 5-minute warning, which is fine because this shouldn't take that long. Once we have this deployed, you'll see what else Code Engine provides in the background. All right, so while this is deploying, so remember, this is we went through Docker Hub and we are pointing to an image on Docker Hub. The other thing I want to show you is what if I want to point it to my source code, right? So NearForm GitHub in this case. I can say, hey, get my code from source code and let's configure what that looks like. So I'll go back to this repository, right? This is where I push my code up to. And I can say, hey, Code Engine, go to this repository, main branch, next, and use this Docker file. Remember, we called it Docker file run. Next. And this is where I have to tell it where to push the image because I'm working with source. So I'll say add Docker Hub. My registry name is NearForm GitHub. My username, and I have to grab my password real quick. Do that, password, and give it my username. All right, so now it knows about my Docker Hub registry. So here, let's again say Upkar namespace, and repository is I forgot what I called it. It might be that it didn't. My NearForm app, was it this one? Let's see. Okay, I'm going to pick that. I'm going to tag this as 2.0.0. Done, create. All right, so that was the second thing I did. All right, let's go back to applications. Now I have two applications. First time, if you remember, I pointed it to Docker Hub. Second time, I pointed it to code, and this actually, it'll build that it'll build that image for me. It'll push it up to Docker Hub, and then it'll deploy the application from that image. So it's doing a whole bunch of things for us. Let's go to this one. This is the Docker Hub one. I can open the URL. You'll see the hello world come up. Now this is taking a little bit of time because the container was not running, right? That's where scaling to 0 happens. So I'm not using the application, it'll scale it to 0. In fact, if I go in here, I don't know if it was barely noticeable, but it went from 0 to 1. So number of instances, there was nothing there, and then it went up 1. And you can see here, this is my application. All right, so within, I think it took us like 2 minutes to deploy this to Code Engine, and you can see my application is running. Now there are cool couple of other things that you should check out when you do try Code Engine. One is this logging. So you get log DNA. It's already hooked into our application, and you can see log DNA by itself provides a lot of features. You can search by time frame, you can search by keywords, and filter logs that way. So log DNA is provided to you. And the other thing I'll mention is if I go back to my if I go back to my overview, you can see the Prometheus kind of monitoring is also provided to you. All right, so I think I'm out of time, but just to recap, we took a let me present this. We took our code, ran it locally, Dockerized it, pushed the image to Docker Hub, and then told Code Engine to go grab that image. Then the second way of doing that was we pushed our code to GitHub and told Code Engine, hey, here's the code, here's the Docker file, you go create my image, push it to Docker Hub, and deploy my application. All right, so again, with Code Engine, you can deploy any type of application. You can do containers, batch jobs, you can deploy from source code, function as a service, right? And the cool thing is you don't have to care about or worry about provisioning, configuring, managing, or securing your applications. All of that is sort of taken care for you in the background, and you only pay when your application is active and being used. All right, with that, I'll stop because I'm out of time now. But thank you for listening. And again, my Twitter handle was on my picture, but look for me on Twitter and we can chat. Thank you.